The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Officer Russell Tate stood tall, his uniform pristine, his confidence unshaken. Across from him, Naomi Carter, a poised black woman, sat cuffed like a criminal. Tate smirked. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. She's a fraud." Naomi's calm expression never wavered. Then she leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The judge's gavel slammed. The verdict loomed. But who was Naomi Carter, really? And how did she end up here? Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. 2 weeks before the courtroom showdown, Special Agent Naomi Carter moved through the busy streets of Atlanta, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Dressed in a sharp but understated blazer, she looked like any other lawyer on her way to a case. But Naomi was far more than she appeared. She wasn't just a civil rights attorney. She was one of the FBI's top undercover agents, deep into an investigation that could expose a web of corruption inside the police department. Her current assignment? Officer Russell Tate, a cop with a spotless record on paper, but a history of falsified arrests, missing body cam footage, and mysteriously dropped charges that had disproportionately targeted black citizens. Naomi had spent months studying his methods, tracking dozens of cases where Tate's word alone had condemned innocent people. Each one followed the same pattern: fabricated evidence, conveniently malfunctioning cameras, and a judicial system all too willing to take his side. Tonight, she was heading to a courthouse where Tate was set to testify against a young black man accused of drug possession. The case reeked of the same pattern she had seen before: a routine traffic stop, a suspiciously timed search, and a conveniently discovered bag of drugs. The defendant had insisted the drugs weren't his, but it didn't matter. The system was built to believe officers like Tate. As Naomi approached the courthouse, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked the screen. Malik, her brother. She hesitated before answering. "Naomi," Malik's voice was tight with frustration. "Tell me you're not still chasing after dirty cops." Naomi sighed, gripping her coffee cup a little tighter. "It's not just a cop, Malik. It's bigger than that." "It's always bigger than that," he snapped. "And what happens when they come for you? Because they will." Naomi closed her eyes for a second, forcing herself to stay composed. Malik had every reason to feel this way. 5 years ago, he had been one of Tate's victims. Arrested on trumped-up drug charges, he had spent months fighting the system to clear his name. Though the case was eventually dropped, it had cost him a college scholarship, a future, and his trust in law enforcement. "Malik," she said quietly, stepping into the courthouse, "I'm doing this so that what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." A long silence stretched between them, then a defeated exhale. "Just be careful, Naomi." She hung up. As she walked past the metal detectors, she straightened her posture and slipped into the crowd of observers inside the courtroom. Across the room, Officer Tate strode in like he owned the place, exchanging nods with the prosecutor. He had no idea that his biggest mistake was already sitting in the back row, watching his every move. Naomi settled into her seat at the back of the courtroom, her eyes fixed on Officer Russell Tate as he confidently took the stand. He moved with the air of a man who had done this countless times, his uniform crisp, his voice steady. The young black man on trial, Darius Miller, barely looked up. His public defender sat stiffly beside him, flipping through thin files that had no real defense to offer. Naomi clenched her jaw. She had seen this too many times before, a system where the verdict had already been decided before the trial even began. The prosecutor approached Tate, offering him a practiced smile. "Officer Tate, can you describe the events leading up to Mr. Miller's arrest?" Tate nodded, his voice smooth, his testimony rehearsed. "Of course. I was conducting a routine patrol when I noticed the defendant acting suspiciously on the corner of Peachtree and Vine. When I approached, he appeared nervous and reached toward his waistband. Out of concern for officer safety, I conducted a stop and frisk, during which I found a small bag of crack cocaine." Naomi's fingers curled into a fist. The same story, the same justification, the same convenient lack of body cam footage. The defense attorney stood, pushing his glasses up his nose. Officer Tate, was your body camera recording during this interaction? Tate sighed, shaking his head as if burdened by the question. Unfortunately, no. The camera malfunctioned. Happens sometimes. It was a lie. Naomi knew it. Every officer in the department had been issued upgraded body cams with automatic fail-safes. They didn't just malfunction. The judge barely looked up. Unless the defense has substantial evidence to the contrary, I'm prepared to move. Forward. And just like that, another young black man was about to be swallowed by the system. Naomi had heard enough. She stood adjusting her blazer and moved toward the exit. But as she stepped into the aisle, she caught something. A shift in the air, a moment of hesitation from Tate. He had seen her, their eyes locked across the room. Naomi watched as his confident smirk faltered for half a second. He recognized her. Not as an FBI agent, of course, he had no idea about that. But as the woman who had been at community meetings, asking too many questions, getting too close. Tate stepped away from the stand, his face tightening. He muttered something to the prosecutor, then turned, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. By the time Naomi reached the hallway, Tate was there. "You lost, lady." His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. "This isn't a place for community activists to stir up trouble." Naomi kept her expression neutral. "Just observing. Last I checked, courtrooms were public spaces." Tate's jaw twitched. He took another step forward, his bulk casting a shadow over her. "Let me see some ID." Naomi knew this moment was dangerous. Showing her real credentials would destroy her cover. Refusing would escalate things, so she did what she had trained. For she handed over her civil rights attorney ID, keeping her movement steady, her face unreadable. Tate examined it slowly, deliberately, lips curling. "Community outreach, huh? More like community agitation." He flicked the ID back at her. "You people always think you're smarter than the system." Naomi caught the card mid-air. Every fiber of her being screamed to call him out, to tell him exactly who he was messing with. Instead, she smiled thinly. "I don't think," she said. "I know." Tate's face darkened. For the first time, real anger flickered in his eyes. "Watch yourself," he muttered. "Keep poking around places you don't belong, and you'll end up on the wrong side of a cell." Naomi held his gaze unflinching. "Funny," she said quietly. "I was about to say the same thing to you." A long silence stretched between them. Then another officer called Tate's name, pulling his attention away. Naomi turned, walking toward the exit, her heart pounding but her mind razor-sharp. This wasn't just about Tate anymore. The way he reacted, the way the judge had barely blinked at his testimony, this was bigger than one dirty cop. This was a system designed to protect men like him, and now Tate had noticed her. He wasn't going to let this go, but neither was she. Comment number 1 if you think Tate just made a serious mistake underestimating Naomi. Like and subscribe if you believe the system needs to change. But here's the real question. Tate just realized Naomi is watching. How far will he go to protect his secrets? Stay tuned. The night air was thick with humidity as Naomi stepped out of the courthouse, her mind still replaying the tense exchange with Officer Tate. He knew she was watching, that much was clear, and men like him didn't just let things go. She walked toward her car, parked a few blocks away, careful to keep her pace steady. She had learned long ago never to let them see you sweat, but deep down she knew this moment was a turning point. Tate wouldn't just leave it alone, he would push back. The only question was, how hard? As she neared her car, something felt off. The quiet was too heavy, a kind of silence that didn't belong in a city like this. Then she saw it. Her car sagged slightly to one side, the tires slashed, all four. The harsh smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. But it wasn't just that. The real message was scrawled across the windshield in thick red paint. Leave, now. Naomi's pulse quickened, but her expression remained unreadable. They wanted her to be afraid, wanted her to second-guess herself, to pack up and disappear. Instead, she pulled out her phone and took pictures, evidence. Then she turned and walked away. She would deal with it later. Right now she had work to do. Back at her apartment, Naomi triple-checked the locks before sitting at her desk. The dim glow of her laptop screen illuminated the room as she pulled. up her latest case files, every wrongful arrest connected to Tate, every missing piece. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Unknown number. She hesitated for a second, then answered, a low voice, disguised and deliberate. If you value your life, drop this. Click. The line went dead. Naomi didn't move. She had expected intimidation, but this? Someone watching her this closely, this quickly? That meant she was closer to something big. The next morning, as she walked into her office, her phone buzzed again. A new message from a confidential informant, someone who had reached out days ago, claiming they had real proof against Tate and others in the department. Meet me at 8 p.m. behind the old train depot. Come alone. Naomi stared at the message, her gut telling her something was wrong, too public, too obvious. But if this informant really had evidence, she couldn't ignore it. She spent the day preparing for every possible outcome, transmitting backup plans to her FBI team without blowing her cover. She couldn't risk asking for direct intervention, yet not until she had undeniable proof. When night fell, Naomi parked 2 blocks away from the meeting spot and approached on foot. The train depot was abandoned, silent except for the distant hum of traffic. She kept to the shadows, scanning the area. Then she saw him. A man in a hoodie standing under a broken street lamp, shifting nervously. Naomi stepped forward cautiously. You wanted to talk? The man barely got a word out before a gunshot cracked through the night. Naomi instinctively dropped low, hand reaching for the concealed weapon at her hip, but it was too late. The informant collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. A car screeched. Away in the distance. Naomi rushed forward, but the man was already gone. She scanned the area, heart pounding. No security cameras, no witnesses. Just a body, and the unmistakable message that she was getting too close. She knew one thing for sure now. This wasn't just about Tate, it was bigger. And whoever was behind it was willing to kill, to keep their secrets buried. Naomi barely slept. The murder of her informant weighed on her like a concrete block. She had spent hours scrubbing through surveillance footage from nearby buildings, but the killer's car had been just out of reach of every camera angle. Whoever had done this knew exactly where the blind spots were. The message was loud and clear. Stop digging or end up like him. But Naomi didn't scare easily. She had faced worse. By morning, she had compiled every detail of the shooting into a report, encrypting it before sending it to her FBI handler. It wasn't enough to take to court, not yet, but it proved that Tate wasn't working alone. There were bigger players pulling the strings. She had just shut her laptop when a hard knock echoed through her apartment. Naomi frowned. No one came. To her place unannounced. She approached the door carefully, peering through the peephole. Then the door burst open. Before she could react, 6 officers in full tactical gear stormed inside, rifles raised. Hands where we can see them. One of them barked. Naomi barely had time to register what was happening before she was grabbed, yanked forward and slammed against the wall. The pressure on her wrists was brutal as they snapped handcuffs around them. What the hell is this? She demanded. Officer Russell Tate stepped through the doorway, smirking. Search the place, he ordered. Naomi gritted her teeth, but she kept her face blank. He wanted to see her panic. He wanted to see fear. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. The officers moved methodically, tearing through her belongings. Looks like someone's been up to no good, Tate said, circling her like a vulture. Drugs, stolen documents, suspicious transfers. In your accounts. He gave a mock frown. You hate to see it. Naomi glared at him. You know damn well this is a setup. Tate leaned in, dropping his voice so only she could hear. Doesn't matter what you know, it matters what they believe. Across the room, an officer pulled out a plastic bag of white powder from her kitchen cabinet. Found something, he called. Naomi's stomach dropped. Tate grinned. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a drug trafficker. She laughed dryly, shaking her head. This is pathetic, Tate. It's sloppy. Tate's smirk didn't waver. Sloppy? No, see, sloppy is when some two-bit dealer gets caught on the street. This is a career-ending, life-destroying charge. This is the kind of thing that puts you away for years. Naomi's mind raced. She knew how this worked. Tate had done it before, doctored reports, planted evidence, officers willing too. lie under oath, and the judge, already in his pocket. As the officers shoved her toward the door, Naomi forced herself to stay calm. She still had one advantage. Tate didn't know who she really was. Not yet. They dragged her through the hallway past the whispers of her neighbors, the flash of camera phones capturing every second. The arrest of a respected black attorney in her own home. The media would heat it up. Tate leaned in one last time before shoving her into the squad car. "Welcome to the other side of the bars," he said. Naomi stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. Comment: Number 1 if you think this setup is Tate's biggest mistake. Like and subscribe if you believe Naomi will fight back harder than ever. But here's the real question. How do you fight the system when it's already stacked against you? Can Naomi turn this around, or is Tate about to destroy everything she's built? Stay tuned. The fluorescent lights in the police precinct's holding area buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the cold gray walls. Naomi sat in an uncomfortable metal chair, her wrists still cuffed, her back straight. She had been in interrogation rooms before, but never on this side of the table. Across from her, Russell Tate leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, exuding pure arrogance. He looked completely at ease, as if this were just another routine arrest. Because to him, it was. Naomi knew exactly what was coming. This was part of his process. He liked to toy with people first, let them stew in silence, make them feel helpless. It was psychological warfare. But Naomi was trained for this. Tate finally spoke, his tone casual, almost amused. "You know, Naomi, I gotta say, I expected better from you." She said nothing. He shook his head, clicking his tongue. "A community leader, a respected attorney, and all this time you were dirty. Drugs, fraud, stolen files. It's a shame." Naomi let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. It worked. Tate leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna sit in that chair, and you're gonna realize how badly you've screwed up." His smirk widened. "Because in about an hour, the DA is going to file formal charges, and by the time this hits the news, your career, gone. Your reputation burned, your credibility shot to hell." He sat back again, arms spread like a man who had already won. "And then, maybe in a few months, if you're lucky, you'll cut a deal and serve less than 5 years." Naomi exhaled slowly. Then she tilted her head, studying him like he was the one under investigation. "You really believe this is over, don't you?" she said, her voice even. Tate chuckled. "Oh, it's over." Naomi leaned forward, mirroring his earlier stance. "Let's talk about that bag of drugs you found in my apartment." She lifted an eyebrow. "Strange how it ended up in a sealed coffee canister I haven't touched in weeks, almost like it was, I don't know, planted." Tate's smirk twitched just for a second, but he recovered fast. "That's cute. But see, you don't get to ask the questions here." Naomi smiled. "No? Because from where I'm sitting, I see a desperate man who just played his biggest card way too early." Tate's expression darkened. "See, I've been watching you," she continued. "I know about the missing body cam footage, the arrests that always seem to rely on your word alone, the cases that somehow get pushed through with zero physical evidence." She leaned in closer. "I know that you have people inside the DA's office, inside the courthouse covering for you, and I know you're scared." Tate's jaw tightened, but he masked it with another smirk. "You think you're the first person to come after me?" he asked, voice low. "You think I don't know how to deal with troublemakers?" Naomi didn't flinch. "I think you're sloppy, Tate. I think you've been protected for so long you don't even realize how much you've left behind." Tate's eyes narrowed. "I also think you've made a mistake," Naomi added, "because there's a reason I didn't resist arrest. There's a reason I let you parade me through the station, let you throw me in this room." She leaned back, keeping her gaze locked on his. "Because I'm not the one who should be afraid." Tate's smirk finally vanished. Before he could respond, the door swung open. A uniformed officer stepped in, clearing his throat. "Lieutenant, we've got a situation." Tate turned, irritated. "What?" The officer hesitated. "It's the FBI. They just walked in." "Naomi, Let the silence stretch. Then she smiled. Tate's face drained of color. Tate's confidence shattered the moment the officer mentioned the FBI. His smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of something Naomi recognized instantly. Panic. He turned to the officer, forcing his voice to stay level. "What do you mean, the FBI?" "They're here," the officer repeated, shifting uncomfortably. "They're asking about the arrest." Naomi watched, saying nothing. She didn't need to. Tate was unraveling all on his own. Tate stood abruptly, straightening his uniform like it would somehow restore his dominance. "I'll handle this." Naomi leaned back in her chair, keeping her face carefully neutral. "Good luck with that." Tate shot her a glare before storming out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Naomi alone in the interrogation room, except she wasn't alone for long. A few minutes later, the door eased open again, this time without the aggressive energy of before. Detective Rachel Vaughn stepped inside, shutting the door quietly behind her. Naomi recognized her immediately, one of the only officers who hadn't looked entirely comfortable during her arrest. Vaughn crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You're not who they say you are you?" Naomi didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied Vaughn, looking for signs of deception, hesitation, doubt. She saw conflict. "I'm exactly who I say I am," Naomi finally said, her voice even. "The real question is, are you?" Vaughn's jaw tightened. She glanced at the one-way mirror, knowing full well that Tate or someone else could be watching. Then she did something that surprised Naomi. She sat down. "I know Tate is dirty," Vaughn admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've known for a while, but knowing and proving are two different things." Naomi kept her expression unreadable. "And yet, you stood by while they dragged me in here." Vaughn exhaled sharply. "You think it's that simple? I have a family. A mortgage. You think Tate hasn't threatened anyone who steps out of line?" Naomi didn't blink. "I think the people Tate goes after don't get a choice." Vaughn flinched. Silence hung between them. Then Vaughn reached into her pocket and slid something. Across the table, a phone. Naomi looked at it, then back at Vaughn. "There's a recording," Vaughn said. "Tate talking to the DA's office. I don't know how deep it goes, but..." She hesitated. "He knew about the warrant before it was issued, which means the case against you. It was signed off before you even got arrested." Naomi picked up the phone, pressing play. Tate's voice crackled through the speaker. "Make sure the paperwork is clean. I want her locked up before she starts sniffing around places she shouldn't." Naomi's stomach tightened, but she didn't react outwardly. Vaughn was watching her closely. "I can't protect you," Vaughn said, "but I can get a message out. If you have someone who can fight this from the outside..." Naomi didn't hesitate. She rattled off a phone number, one that Vaughn quickly wrote down. Then she slid the phone back. Vaughn hesitated for a second, longer than stood. "I hope you know what you're doing," she muttered. Naomi met her gaze. "I do." Vaughn left the room without another word. Naomi exhaled slowly. For the first time since this nightmare started, she had a way to fight back. But would it be enough? Comment number 1 if you think Vaughn is finally making the right choice. Like and subscribe if you believe Naomi is about to turn the tables. But here's the real question. Tate still holds all the power. What will he do when he realizes someone in his own department is helping Naomi? Stay tuned. The minutes dragged on inside the interrogation room, but Naomi remained calm, patient, calculating. She had spent years in the FBI learning to read people, anticipate their moves, and strike when they least expected it. Right now, Tate believed he had her trapped, but she knew better. Vaughn's recording had changed everything. Tate wasn't just corrupt, he had gotten reckless, and reckless men made mistakes. The heavy metal door swung open again. This time, it wasn't Vaughn. Tate walked in, his swagger back in full force, trying to mask the frustration lurking beneath the surface. Naomi could tell something had shifted outside this room. The FBI's presence was making waves. He pulled out a chair, flipping it around before sitting on it backward, arms draped over the top. "You know," he said, shaking his head, "you had a good run. People liked you, looked up to you." He sighed dramatically. "Shame how all that disappears overnight." Naomi didn't respond. Tate's smile tightened. She wasn't playing into his game, and it was getting to him. "I just got off the phone with the DA," he continued. "They're not budging. Formal charges are coming down within the hour." He leaned in. "So, unless you're ready to start talking, this is only going to get worse for you." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Talking about what?" Tate chuckled, but his eyes darkened. "See, here's the thing. We found some very interesting files on your laptop." Naomi kept her expression neutral. She already knew those files had been planted. Tate pulled out a folder, flipping it open. "Bank records, client lists, some sensitive legal documents that I bet weren't supposed to be in your possession." He made a clicking sound with his tongue. "Man, it's almost like you've been running a little operation of your own." Naomi studied him. "You're getting desperate." Tate's eyes flickered, just for a second. That tiny moment of hesitation told her everything. He was losing control. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "You really think this is going to hold up? A judge you own? A DA who buries evidence?" She smiled. "You don't have enough." Tate's expression hardened. "I have more than enough." Naomi shook her head. "No, you don't. And you know why?" She let the silence stretch just long enough. "Because I didn't resist." Tate blinked. "I let you arrest me," she continued. "I let you bring me here. Because I knew you were too arrogant to realize what that meant." Tate's jaw clenched. He wasn't smirking anymore. Naomi leaned back, completely composed. "Right now, your people are running through my apartment, my office, my files, scrambling to find something to justify this little stunt. But you and I both know there's nothing there." Tate exhaled sharply through his nose, his anger slipping through the cracks. Then the knock on the door came. One of his officers stepped inside, face pale. "Something was wrong." "Lieutenant," the officer said hesitantly. We got a problem." Tate turned, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Handle it," the officer swallowed. "It's the FBI." Naomi watched Tate's shoulders tense. "They're demanding access to the evidence," the officer continued, "and they're asking questions about the warrant." For the first time, Tate's confidence visibly cracked. Naomi smiled. Tate ran, a hand down his face, standing abruptly. He turned to Naomi, voice low and sharp. "Don't think for a second this is over." She met his stare. "Oh, it's far from over." Tate stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Naomi sat back, her heart steady, her mind racing. He had played his biggest card too soon, and now it was her turn. Naomi sat in the interrogation room, calm on the outside, but her mind was working fast. She knew Tate was panicking. The FBI breathing down his neck meant his fabricated case was crumbling. But desperation made men like him dangerous. The door remained shut for what felt like an eternity. Naomi knew she was supposed to be transferred soon, either to a holding cell or a court appearance. But something felt off. Then the door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Ones she hadn't seen before. "Time to move," one of them said flatly. Naomi studied their faces. Something in their body language sent a chill down her spine. They weren't just here to move her. Still, she didn't resist as they pulled her to her feet, walking her down the dimly lit hallway. The precinct was strangely quiet. No Tate. No Vaughn. Her instincts screamed at her. Instead of leading her to the usual holding area, they took a side exit, heading toward the back of the precinct. Naomi's pulse quickened. "You're taking me through the back?" she asked, keeping her voice even. One of the officers gave a tight smile. "Quieter that way, less of a scene." Naomi immediately understood what was happening. She was being walked into an ambush. They pushed open the exit door, and Naomi's worst fears were confirmed. A van was waiting outside, unmarked, engine running. Naomi had been in law enforcement long enough to recognize an off-the-books extraction. She wasn't being taken to another cell. She was being taken somewhere she wouldn't come back from. She had seconds to react. The officer gripping her arm tightened his hold, but Naomi moved first. With a sharp twist, she yanked herself free, driving her elbow straight into his ribs. He stumbled back, cursing, but the second officer grabbed at her. Naomi dropped low, forcing his balance off, then delivered a precise knee to his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. The first officer recovered fast, reaching for his gun. Naomi didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, grabbing his wrist before he could draw, twisting it brutally until she heard a sickening pop. The gun clattered. To the ground. Naomi dove for it. Just as a shot rang out, the bullet barely missed her, shattering the side mirror of the van. She rolled, bringing the gun up, aiming at the second officer. But before she could fire, the side door of the van slammed open. A third man stepped out. Dressed in tactical gear, gun raised, Naomi had nowhere to go. Then screeching tires. A black SUV whipped into the alleyway, its headlights blinding. Naomi barely had time to register what was happening before gunfire erupted. The man from the van went down instantly, a bullet tearing through his shoulder. The two officers scrambled for cover as the SUV's doors flew open. Detective Rachel Vaughn jumped out, gun drawn. "Get in!" she yelled. Naomi didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the SUV, Vaughn covering her with precision shots, forcing the remaining officers to duck. As soon as Naomi slid into the passenger seat, Vaughn hit the gas. The tires screamed against the pavement as the SUV peeled out of the alley, leaving Tate's men in the dust. Naomi sat breathless, adrenaline pounding through her veins. Vaughn didn't speak for a few seconds, just gripping the wheel tight, her jaw clenched. Then she exhaled. Sharply, "Tate just signed your death warrant," she muttered. Naomi wiped the sweat from her brow, her mind already shifting to the next move. "No," she corrected. "He just made his biggest mistake." Comment number 1 if you think Tate has finally pushed too far. Like and subscribe if you believe Naomi is about to hit back even harder. But here's the real question. Naomi has survived the hit, but now she's out in the open. How can she bring Tate down before he tries again? Stay tuned. The sun barely peeked over the Atlanta skyline as Naomi sat in the passenger seat of the SUV, bruised, exhausted, but unbroken. Vaughn had driven them to a safe house, an old warehouse repurposed for undercover FBI operations. Inside, Naomi had spent the last few hours piecing together her next move. Tate had just tried to have her killed. That wasn't a scare tactic, it was desperation. He knew his empire was crumbling, and now he was doing whatever it took to erase his mistakes. But Naomi had something he didn't. Proof. She pulled out Vaughn's phone, the one containing the recording of Tate's conversation with the DA, the evidence that Tate had orchestrated her arrest long before she even stepped into that courthouse. It was enough to get the FBI involved, enough to force their hand. An hour later, she sat across from Agent Morales, the lead investigator on Tate's corruption case. He had been overseeing her undercover operation from a distance, reluctant to get directly involved before she had something concrete. Now, with an attempted murder on top of a conspiracy to frame an innocent woman, there was no more waiting. Morales set his coffee down, watching Naomi carefully. "You sure about this?" Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "I want him taken down in front of everyone. I want the whole world to see what he is." Morales exhaled. "Then we do it today." Naomi knew what that meant. Tate was scheduled to testify in another case that morning, a high-profile drug charge against yet another young black man. The case was weak, built entirely on Tate's word. Naomi was going to make sure that by the time Tate left that courtroom, he would be the one in cuffs. Hours later, Naomi walked through the courthouse, doors her back straight, her presence commanding. She was no longer the woman being dragged through this building in handcuffs. She was here to finish this. She stepped into the courtroom just as the judge was calling the session to order. Tate sat confidently on the witness stand, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Officer Tate, can you describe the events leading up to the arrest of Marcus Davis?" Tate nodded, settling into his routine performance. "Yes, sir. I was conducting a routine patrol when I noticed the defendant acting suspiciously near the..." Doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Every head turned as Naomi walked in, followed by 2 federal agents. Tate's smirk faltered. Naomi didn't sit. She didn't hide. She stood where he could see her, arms crossed, watching. The prosecutor hesitated, then glanced toward Tate. "Officer Tate?" Tate's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Yes, as I was saying." Naomi tilted her head slightly, enjoying the way his confidence cracked. And then Morales stepped forward from the side of the room, a warrant in his hand. "Your Honor," Morales said, his voice carrying through the courtroom, "I have a federal arrest warrant for Officer Russell Tate." The room froze. Tate's face drained of color. The judge frowned. "Excuse me?" Morales stepped closer, his badge gleaming. "Officer Tate is being charged with falsifying evidence, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit murder." Gasps erupted from the jury, the audience, even the defense attorneys. Tate stood suddenly, panic flashing across his face. This is insane. Morales nodded to the bailiffs. "Take him into custody." The officers hesitated. Tate was one of their own. But Naomi watched closely, waiting. Would they back him? Would they protect the lie? Finally, one of the bailiffs stepped forward, grabbing Tate's arm. "No, no!" Tate jerked back, eyes wild, looking at the judge. "Judge Holloway, you know this is fake. This is a setup." The judge, the same one who had allowed Tate's cases to sail through unchallenged, shifted uncomfortably. He could feel the weight of the eyes on him. Naomi smiled slightly. This was what true justice looked like, when corruption could no longer hide behind power. The bailiff yanked Tate's hands behind his back, cuffing him. "You can't do this," Tate roared. He turned toward Naomi, his face twisted with rage. "This was your plan. You think this makes you a hero?" Naomi finally spoke, her voice calm and sharp. "No, Tate." She took a step closer, meeting his furious, panicked stare. "This makes me the person who ended you." And just like that, Tate was dragged from the courtroom, no longer the hunter, but the hunted. The echo of the courtroom doors slamming shut behind Tate's arrest was still ringing in Naomi's ears as she stepped into the bright hallway. The energy in the courthouse had shifted. Murmurs spread like wildfire, whispers of disbelief and undeniable realization. One of their own had fallen. But Naomi wasn't finished. She strode down the hallway with purpose, flanked by Agent Morales and Detective Vaughn. Tate was just the first domino to fall. Now she was going after the ones who had enabled him for years. Morales kept pace beside her. "We have Tate in custody, but we need more to take down the whole network." Naomi pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Vaughn had handed it to her. Just before the arrest, a collection of sealed case files, financial transactions, and internal memos tying multiple officials to Tate's operations. Naomi handed it to Morales. "This is what we need." Morales took it, his expression unreadable. "This implicates more than just Tate." Naomi nodded. "Judge Holloway, the district attorney's office, multiple high-ranking officers. They've been using Tate as their enforcer for years." Vaughn sighed, running a hand through her hair. "That explains why everything was always so clean on paper. No body cam footage, no hard evidence, because the system protected him." Naomi turned to Morales. "We take this public. If we let them clean it up behind closed doors, they'll bury it." Morales hesitated. "Naomi, if we do this, we're exposing more than just a few bad cops. We're talking about shaking the foundation of an entire legal system." Naomi met his gaze, unwavering. "Then we shake it." Morales studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Let's do it." The next morning, Naomi sat across from a row of reporters, cameras flashing, microphones poised. The press conference was national. The FBI had moved fast. Tate's arrest had triggered a chain reaction. Naomi didn't mince words. For years, Russell Tate operated with impunity, fabricating evidence, coercing false confessions, and wrongfully imprisoning black citizens. "Under the guise of justice," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. But he didn't do it alone. The room fell into silence. Naomi placed a stack of documents on the table before her. These files contain proof that Judge Holloway, key members of the district attorney's office, and high-ranking officials within the police department facilitated these crimes, covering up misconduct and ensuring no case against Tate ever made it to trial. The reporters erupted in shouts of questions, but Naomi didn't stop. "They thought they were untouchable," she continued, scanning the crowd. But they were wrong. Within hours, Judge Holloway was suspended. The district attorney's office launched an internal review, and multiple officers within Tate's precinct were placed under federal investigation. But Naomi knew this fight wasn't over. As the press conference ended, she stepped away from the podium, heart still pounding. Morales caught up to her, his expression serious. "You did it," he said. Naomi shook her head. "We just opened the door. Now we have to walk through it." Because Tate wasn't the real problem. The system that made him possible still stood. Naomi stood in the FBI's command center, watching the live feed from the holding facility where Tate was being processed. Officers moved in and out of the frame, securing him like any other criminal, but Naomi knew better. Tate wasn't just any criminal. He was a man with nothing left to lose. Agent Morales approached, his phone in hand, his expression grim. "We have a problem." Naomi's stomach tightened. "What is it?" Morales handed her the phone. "Tate's already making moves. He has connections inside the department that are still loyal to him. We intercepted a call from one of his people." Naomi pressed the phone to her ear, listening to the distorted audio of a hushed conversation. "They're moving me tonight." Tate's voice crackled through the speaker. "We don't have much time. Get me out of here and I'll handle the rest." The blood drained from Naomi's face. "Tate is planning an escape," she murmured. Morales nodded. "And if he gets out, he's not just running, he's coming for you." The realization settled in like ice in her veins. If Tate got loose, he wouldn't disappear quietly. He would silence everyone who had betrayed him, starting with her. Naomi snapped into action. "We need to move him to a federal facility tonight, no delays." Morales was already dialing. "I'll put the order through, but we need to assume that someone inside the transport team is working for him. We'll send backup." Naomi wasn't about to take any chances. "I'm going with them." Morales hesitated. "That's a risk. I don't care," she cut in. "If Tate escapes, this case unravels. I need to see him locked away myself." An hour later, the prison transport van pulled into a secured loading dock. Tate was brought out in heavy restraints, but his expression was eerily calm. He wasn't worried. That's what scared Naomi the most. She climbed into the armored vehicle, taking a seat across from Tate, her eyes locked onto his the entire time. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the police radio. Then Tate smirked. "You think this is over?" he said, his voice smooth, unshaken. Naomi didn't respond. Tate leaned forward slightly, his restraints clinking against the metal cuffs. "You have no idea what you just started." Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "And you have no idea what's waiting for you in federal prison." Tate chuckled, shaking his head. "Prison isn't my destination, sweetheart." Before Naomi could process his words, the entire transport van lurched violently to the side, tires screeching as it was struck by another vehicle. The world tilted. The metal groaned. Naomi was thrown sideways, her shoulder slamming into the van's wall as the vehicle spun out of control. The moment it stopped, gunfire erupted. Outside, masked men swarmed the vehicle, their movements precise, tactical. Naomi's head pounded as she fought through the dizziness. She reached for her weapon, but Tate was already moving. The impact had loosened his restraints just enough. Naomi's eyes locked onto his just as he lunged. The fight wasn't over. The van rocked violently, metal groaning as bullets ripped through the side panels. Naomi hit the floor, her ears ringing, her vision blurring from the impact of the crash. Through the chaos, she saw Tate moving, the force of the collision having loosened his restraints just enough. He wasn't waiting for a rescue. He was taking control of his own escape. Naomi's training kicked in instantly. She fought past the disorientation and lunged, reaching for her weapon just as Tate twisted his body and swung his elbow toward her throat. She barely dodged in time. Pain exploded down her side, but she gritted her teeth, rolling away just as Tate yanked his now loosened cuffs free. Outside, masked gunmen were closing in, moving with tactical precision. The van doors were still intact, but it wouldn't take them long to break through. Tate smirked, rubbing his bruised wrists. "You really thought they were gonna let me rot in a cage?" Naomi forced herself upright, keeping her gun locked on him. "You're not walking away from this." Tate's smirk widened, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "You're still under the impression that you're in control here." With one fluid motion, he lunged forward, shoving the weight of his body against Naomi. The gun went off, but the angle was wrong. The bullet barely grazed his arm. Tate wrenched the weapon from her hands, twisting it out of her grip with brutal efficiency. Naomi barely had time to react before his fist slammed into her ribs. The pain was instant, searing. She stumbled back, gasping for breath. Tate wasted no time. He grabbed the gun, pointing it directly at her chest. But Naomi had already seen what he hadn't. She wasn't alone. A sharp crack rang through the van. Tate's body jerked violently, his shoulder snapping back as blood sprayed across the metal. "Walls!" He staggered, the gun falling from his grip. Behind him, Detective Vaughn stood in the open door of the van, gun still aimed, breathing hard. Tate turned, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Hayotidut," Vaughn didn't flinch. "You're done." The masked men outside realized the plan was crumbling. One of them shouted an order, and in an instant, the entire team aborted the mission, retreating into their vehicles. Naomi forced herself upright, her ribs screaming in protest. Vaughn kept her gun trained on Tate, but Naomi could see the hesitation in her eyes. The weight of betraying a fellow officer, even a corrupt one, wasn't lost on her. But Naomi had no hesitation. She stepped forward, pressing her boot firmly onto Tate's wounded shoulder. He let out a choked sound of pain, but Naomi didn't. "Ease the pressure. You were so sure the system would protect you," she said, her voice cold. "You thought you were untouchable." Tate's teeth clenched, his breath ragged. "You were wrong." The flashing lights of FBI reinforcements illuminated the scene. Agents stormed in, weapons drawn, securing the last of Tate's men before they could fully escape. Morales stepped into view, his expression unreadable as he looked between Naomi, Tate, and Vaughn. Then, without a word, he nodded to the nearest agent. "Cuff him." Tate wasn't smirking anymore. The agents hauled him up, forcing his hands behind his back. Blood dripped down his sleeve, but Naomi didn't see regret in his eyes, only rage. As they dragged him toward the waiting armored vehicle, Tate turned his gaze back to Naomi. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed. "You think the system isn't gonna find another guy like me?" Naomi held his stare, unwavering. "Maybe," she took a step forward, "but it won't be you." Tate's face twisted in fury, but before he could respond, the agents shoved him into the vehicle, slamming the doors shut. The engines roared, and just like that, Russell Tate was gone. Naomi let out a slow breath, exhaustion weighing down on her like a heavy cloak. It was over, at least this part of it. Vaughn holstered her weapon, shaking her head. "I don't know whether I just saved your life or made mine a hell of a lot more complicated." Naomi gave a tired smile. "Probably both," Vaughn sighed. "Figures." Morales approached, arms crossed. "You realize this is only the beginning, right?" Naomi nodded. "Yeah." Tate was gone, but the corruption that had built him, protected him, and enabled him for years wasn't. Naomi knew this fight was far from over, but for the first time, she knew exactly where to start. And this time, she wasn't alone. Naomi's story is more than just a battle between one corrupt cop and one determined woman. It's a brutal reminder of how deeply rooted corruption can be. Russell Tate wasn't an anomaly. He was a product of a system designed to protect people like him while punishing those who dared to challenge it. But what this story truly highlights is that corruption thrives in silence. For years, Tate operated without consequence because too many people looked the other way. Judges, district attorneys, fellow officers, they all saw what he was doing, yet they let it happen. Some out of fear, some out of greed, and some simply because they believed that's how the system was supposed to work. And that's what makes Naomi's victory so powerful. Not just because she took Tate down, but because she forced the world to see the truth. One of the most dangerous aspects of systemic corruption is that it's invisible to those who don't experience it firsthand. People trust the system because they want to believe in fairness, in justice, in accountability. But the reality is, justice isn't automatic. It's something that has to be fought for, and sometimes the fight is brutal. Naomi's mission wasn't just about proving her own innocence. It was about exposing how many lives had been destroyed under the weight of Tate's lies. Every false conviction, every family torn apart, every person who never got a second chance because a cop decided their fate before they even got a trial. By shining a light on the truth, Naomi forced accountability. She didn't wait for the system to fix itself. She dragged it, kicking and screaming, into the light. A key moment in Naomi's journey was Detective Vaughn's decision to switch sides. Vaughn, like many others, had known something wasn't right, but she stayed silent because she was afraid. And that's exactly how corruption stays in power, by making people believe they're powerless. But Naomi proved that one person's courage can create a ripple effect. Vaughn hesitated, but once she took that first step, she became part of the solution instead of the problem. It's easy to assume that fighting back is impossible, that speaking out won't change anything. But Naomi showed that change happens. When people refuse to stay silent, Naomi won the battle, but the war against corruption and systemic abuse is far from over. For every Tate that gets taken down, there are more waiting to take his place. And that's the most unsettling part of this story. This isn't just fiction. There are real people in real cities facing the same injustices Naomi fought against. There are countless officers who operate like Tate, protected by the same broken system, and countless innocent people paying the price. So the real question is, what happens next? Will people let another Tate rise, unchecked and unstoppable? Or will they choose to become part of the fight, to demand real change, to refuse to look the other way? Do you believe the system can truly change, or will it always protect those in power? Comment number 1 if you believe justice is worth fighting for. If you were in Naomi's position, would you have done the same? Or would you have taken a different approach? Tell us your thoughts below. And if you want to hear more stories that shine a light on injustice and real-world corruption, don't forget to like, subscribe and share, because the truth is powerful, but only if people are willing to listen. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop fighting for what's right. See you in the next story.